Well, it's Labor Day weekend, and we hope that you're enjoying your time off and having a little fun. But here in the Commonwealth of Virginia, it's not just Labor Day, but it's also election season. It's Stay the Water. I'm your host, Eric Claville, and you're joining us for our pre-election series show. Once again, we'd like to thank you for joining us here on Stay the Water, as you always do every Sunday morning, as we broadcast from none other than the campus of the Norfolk State University, home of the Spartan Nation, from none other than WNSB Hot 91, the soul of VA. Well, listen, let me tell you, we are in full swing here in college and schools, and all the kids that are going back to school, K through 12. We hope that you have a phenomenal year. Also, to all the teachers, we hope that you also have a phenomenal year as well, because you have, if not the most important, one of the most important jobs ever, and that is training and teaching our future. So thank you for the work that you do. Thank you for the passion that you have for your jobs. And we thank you for what you're actually going to impart upon the future of our country. And that is the skills, the knowledge, and the know-how to lead the next generation. For all those that are back in college in full swing, we hope that you're enjoying yourselves as well, because here at Spartan Nation, we kicked off our football season with none other than Coach Vic's debut here at Norfolk State on last Saturday. So again, congratulations to Coach Vic and the team for all the work that they're doing. And listen, not only that, but we also kicked it off a little early on that day on Thursday. Actually, the game was Thursday last week. And when we kicked it off with ESPN Live with First Take with none other than Stephen A. Smith, Molly Heron, and yes, none other than Cam Newton as well. So thank you so much, First Take ESPN, for making Norfolk State University the very first stop on your HBCU tour. So all the things that are happening here at Norfolk State University, we believe that we are in the golden age of the green and gold as we celebrate our 90th year here at the university. Well, not only are we just celebrating 90 years and things are going very well here at the institution, but we're also here in the Commonwealth. We're kicking off our pre-election series. And this is the time of the year where I go and for a couple of shows, we break down what's really happening and what's going to happen moving forward here in the gubernatorial election and also the election for our House of Delegates. That's right. Here in the Commonwealth of Virginia, here in 2025, on Election Day, November 4th, we are electing or re-electing all 100 seats in the House of Delegates. And we also will elect a new governor, lieutenant governor, attorney general here in the Commonwealth. Now, in the Commonwealth, our governors cannot do consecutive terms. You have to take a term off. That was created in the beginning of our great Commonwealth by the wisdom of Thomas Jefferson and others. And because of that, it was created so that, there could be change and there wouldn't be a tyranny or you wouldn't have a king forever. So here in the Commonwealth, every 4 years, we elect a new governor here in our great state. And with that being the case, it gives us an opportunity to engage and have new ideas, build up on the same ideas if they're great ideas for the people of the Commonwealth. But I want to give you a few dates of what is happening. So we have here, election is November 4th. November 4th, we would elect the election for the governor, lieutenant governor, attorney general, Virginia House of Delegates, and also local offices. Make sure you pay attention to your local races, because here in Hampton Roads, we also have some local races with our Commonwealth's attorneys here in the city of Norfolk and Newport News. Also a treasurer in the city of Newport News. So all these things are very important because there are local races where you are as well. So make sure you're paying attention. Make sure that you are locked in and understand what elections are happening in your city, because all politics is local. Also in Chesapeake, the election of a new sheriff. So make sure you're paying attention, because we look at, of course, national news and state news makes attention every now and then. But the local politics is really what impacts us the most immediately. Our local city government, our local school board, and various policies, the sheriff that we elect, and the things that they do with also the school board monies and decisions that are made in city council across the board. These affect us living every single day in our community. So we want to make sure that you guys are locked in, and we're here to make sure that you are on top of it as well. Here we have now you can register to vote. For those of you who are not registered, you can register to vote up until deadline, October 24th. Also, you can apply for a mail-in ballot up to October 24th of this year. Now, in-person voting starts September 19th all the way through November 1st. September 19th all the way through November 1st. Make sure that you are early voting. Make sure you're locked in, because that's when you can vote starting 45 days up to Election Day, because of the General Assembly during Governor Northam's time, in order to expand access to voting as opposed to shrinking access to voting. So make sure that you are voting. Make sure you're participating, because this is your country. This is your Commonwealth. This is our city, and this is our community, and your voice matters. So we're going to talk more about that, and I'm going to give you those dates again as we move forward. But again, I want to make sure that you understand the importance of what is happening in your community, the importance of ensuring that you know what is taking place. And if you know what's taking place, then that means that you could be a more well-informed citizen. But now I want to take a look at the importance of this gubernatorial race. When we take a look at the importance of the gubernatorial race, this is something where we have to make sure that we understand what's happening to us in our community. And it's just not electing a person from popularity contests, but we're electing individuals that are going to create policies, and they're going to fight for us and whatever issues that you are near and dear to your heart. But also, whatever issues are near and dear to your heart, there's also a collective push for our Commonwealth, making sure that we are strong as one, because if we stand together as one and we're united on policies that will impact us for the long term and make us stronger educationally, economically, community-wise, family-wise, then that means that we become a more stronger Commonwealth moving forward. So let's take a look at the impact of this election and why it's important to vote, not just for our national politics, the impact on the statewide, the Commonwealth itself, but also our local communities. Now let's take a look at some of these policies. I always say, as Virginia goes, so does the rest of the country. Many people believe that Virginia is a bellwether, especially for this Trump era. As a matter of fact, when we look at the 2025 Virginia gubernatorial race, it's widely viewed, as a very key indicator of what Donald Trump's impact is going to be, not just here in the Commonwealth, but across the country. Now, analysts, and including myself, we tend to look at Virginia as the election of the governor from the opposite party and the sitting U.S. president, making this election look like a national election itself. In other words, when one party is in office, more than likely the other party elects a governor here in Virginia. So we saw that happen in the last several elections here in Virginia. So we'll see if that trend continues. And we take a look at the Democratic ticket. Democratic ticket is united. You have the governor, the top of the ticket, Spanberger. You have the Democrat, Jay Jones, as Attorney General, and also Senator Hashmi as Lieutenant Governor candidate. But when you look at the GOP ticket, it's what we call a split ticket for the most part. In other words, you haven't really seen the three candidates together. As a matter of fact, when you look at the current Lieutenant Governor, Republican Winsome Sears, who's running at the top of the ticket, John Reed, the Lieutenant Governor candidate, there was a kind of a little controversy between the party. And then, of course, Jason Miyares, who is the current Attorney General here for the Commonwealth, is also running for re-election. Now, with this is probably one of the few times we may have, or the potential of what's called a split ticket election. In other words, usually the ticket wins the election. So whoever's running for those three offices on the Democratic side or Republican side, they usually vote down ballot. And those individuals become your elected officials. However, this may be a little different this time around. It has the potential, I will say. Now, when you look at the polls, it does show that the polls are tightening. It's about a 7 percentage point lead with the Democratic candidate, Spanberger, over the Republican candidate, Winsome Sears. However, the AG race is much closer, around 3 percentage points, along with the lieutenant governors also race as well when you look at some of the latest polls. With this being the case, this could be pretty interesting. And this is according to the Washington Post, they do see this as a split ticket potential and GOP as they recalibrate. But one of the bigger issues we're looking at the impact of this election on both our economy, on the education. Also, we look at the Trump influence policies and their effects. So let's take a look at a couple of these areas now. As it relates to the economy. Now, again, the Rage Occasion always says, it's the economy, stupid. It's always about the money. In other words, kitchen table politics, or being able to afford gasoline, being able to afford lunch money for children, being able to afford that stop at the corner store or the stop at the convenience store for that cup of coffee or maybe a latte at Starbucks here or there. Or even more importantly, being able to afford groceries and being able to eat out about once, maybe twice a week, without it hurting your pocket. These are the things that all citizens are worried about because they impact us right now. But when you are kind of scrambling because of job cuts, now we're looking at a different conversation. So when we look at the federal spending reduction and employment risk with this election, according to VPM, with nearly a quarter of Virginia's economy dependent on federal spending, particularly through defense and VA contracts, the Trump-era cuts pose a direct threat. Now let's take a look. According to VPM, 24% of the economy is tied to federal dollars. All right? That's $100 billion US went to federal contractors in 2023. That's in dollars and cents. Now let's look at the employment. Unemployment is already rising with the 8,400 job losses between May and June, and projections show, according to VPM, troubling trends into 2026. Now, according to Virginia Business and VPM, when we look at Hampton Roads as a region, we rely heavily on defense-related economy activity. So we're looking at about 40% of it. Now, defense spending, we know, when we look at the reconciliation budget, or called by the popular name, the Big Beautiful Bill, and some call it in opposition, the Big Ugly Bill, we see where defense spending may grow, but tariffs and federal cuts could dampen our regional stability, right? So in the Big Beautiful Bill, the reconciliation bill, what took place is that there was increased spending in certain areas, AI, quantum computing, and also defense. When we take a look at the increase in this defense spending, it is very significant. So we've got the largest shipbuilding company here in the country, located in Hampton Roads, Huntington Ingalls, that received an influx of billions of dollars to build new submarines. There's been a push to build new ships, new submarines for the United States. So this is a jolt to our economy. But also, here we have the largest naval base in the world. And with increased spending in some areas of defense and some cuts, it looks like there will be a stabilizing off or increase in the impact of here in the Commonwealth. Now, when we take a look at what the affordability of our time here in the Commonwealth, and what are the candidates saying? Spanberger has a resilience plan where she proposes tackling economic pain via apprenticeship, expansion, rural broadband, infrastructure, aid for laid-off federal workers, affordability measures, and protecting against terrorists. Now, according to Virginia Mercury, there's growing caution in Youngkin's budget planning because in response to uncertainty in federal financing, Governor Youngkin, he set aside $900 million reserve, cutting back on capital projects to cushion in case of policy-driven shocks, which we currently have. These are the shocks. In other words, these are what we call the shock and awe. It's impacting us tremendously. So again, when we look at this election is very important as it relates to the economy because of the cuts that we have. When you look at our spending, our dependency on federal government as a whole, Virginia, 24% of the economy, $109 billion US dollars. But also the impact of those cuts of jobs, loss of jobs at 8,400, along with more coming in 2026, it looks very bleak for some areas in the Commonwealth. In Hampton Roads, we will be able to buffet some of that because of increased defense spending. So in other words, you have to go where you have to follow the money. If the money's going here, you got to go there. If the money's not going there, then you're going to end up not making the money that you need. That is a very interesting part when we look at what's happening here in the campaigns, both for governor and also for the House of Delegates. The House of Delegates are going to run, shoulder to shoulder with the top of their ticket for the most part. So therefore, if the Spanberger plan is resilience in order to provide funding and help and aid for laid off federal workers to expand and broadband and in rural areas and apprenticeship programs for jobs, infrastructure, affordability measures, and protecting against terrorists, then that's going to help our Commonwealth. The question is, what about the other side? So you have to look at their plan as well and make your decision and vote accordingly. So this is another area I want to take a look at. I call it one of the 3 E's. Economics, education is number 2. Now, when we look at education and the impact and the importance of this election on it, we look at the funding, the policies, and what's happening federally. So let's look at federal first. So the U.S., according to news reports, the U.S. Department of Education shuttered, if it was shuttered, which they are bringing it down and basically chipping away at it, Virginia could lose over $1.4 billion in education funds, jeopardizing Title I programs, special education, student aid, federal civil rights enforcement. Now, one estimate highlights that more than 260,000 students rely on Pell Grants and loans, and 700,000 receive subsidized meals, creating a potential fiscal crisis. Now, we do know there have been moves made by the federal government and the Trump administration and backed up by Republicans as it relates to the impact of the Department of Education here in the Commonwealth, but also across the country. Now, when we take a look at what's under fire, when we look at Project 2025 and the erosion of public education, according to the Virginia Mercury, a Trump-aligned blueprint, it basically proposes slashes in Head Start, ending student loan forgiveness as we know it, which they've scaled down there, also scaling down DEI protections and promoting a lot of school choice options. When we look at what's happening in the state and the Democrats, they view this as a rollback of core educational investments. But where does this differ, right? When we look at the Republican and Democratic education policy. Let's look at the top of the ticket. Winston-Sears, according to reports, supports expanding charter schools, charter lab schools, virtual schools, opposes critical race theory, and suggests longer school days or year-round schedules to manage learning loss. Now, the top of the ticket, Spanberger camp, the Democrats, supports lifting caps on funding support positions, which is about a $1.4 billion commitment so far, and reversing right-to-work laws, bolstering educators and also unions. And then we also look at the impact of culture, in which has a real effect on how we view society, how we hire, how we educate, the people we educate and the like. Diversity, equity, and inclusion policies have been under fire with this administration. When we look at higher ed and also more specifically K-12, when we look at what the Department of Education is doing with our universities, according to the Washington Post, of course, VMI, Virginia Military Institute, their board went against their superintendent and replaced him, the first African-American superintendent as well, also brother of Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated, In addition to that, they went after the president of the University of Virginia. He resigned, as opposed to the threats of having funding cut to save that funding. He stepped down. But the education department didn't stop there. Now, they found that George Mason University's race-conscious DEI hiring practices were unlawful, according to the civil rights of this administration, demanding apologies and policy changes. And of course, the president of George Mason University has refused, according to the Washington Post, Greg Williams. So when we take a look at education and policy, this election, the two candidates and the parties supporting these candidates and the members of the House of Delegates are in opposite directions. This is a clear indication of where they differ. One protects educators with unions, bolstered lift caps on support of spending, support funding for various positions, and the other, expanding charter schools, which takes money from local schools and virtual schools, and also extending longer days with less money, and also opposing critical race theory teaching, or what has been called teaching real history. So when we take a look at education and the economy, the tickets, the candidates are diametrically opposed in the way forward as it relates to their plan. And then finally, when we take a look at the influence of the Trump policies on this particular election, let's start first with the workforce. Then we'll take a look at some domestic policies. And also we got to talk politics and why some people are turned off and why it's polarized. You know, when you take a look at the workforce, we talked about it earlier with the economy itself, the decrease of the workforce, the decrease of what's happening there. It is something that is eye-opening. As a matter of fact, if you look no further than, Northern Virginia, which is the suburbs of Washington, D.C., saw massive exits of the federal government, some voluntary, a lot involuntary, through cuts, firings, laying off. Well, they call it layoffs, but we know what those are. That's just a firing that is, just tapered off, but it is a firing. And then finally, when we look at what's happening with the economy up there, the economy was booming, but now places like Northern Virginia, Hampton Roads, which is home to many federal workers, DOGE has made its mark on these areas. So this has a chance of reshaping, shaping both the election and also how people view these two particular candidates, especially if the President of the United States comes out and supports, or even comes down here, or the Vice President as a surrogate comes here to support the governor, or if the minority party, the party in the minority, the Democrats, they come out and come down and support the candidate here as well. So according to Politico, this, and also Arlington Local News, the impact of Trump's trimming of the federal bureaucracy through DOGE and buyouts will have an effect, or has had an effect. And it will also shape voter sentiments moving forward. But we can't just stop there. When we take a look at the domestic policy, now again, targeting school districts, education, it was number one. When you look at, of course, for example, Fairfax Loudoun community with the target over inclusive policies, bathroom policies, and threatening to defund them as it relates to transgender policies under Title IX enforcement. That's using or weaponizing funding in order to change certain policies. It's happening right before us. And when you look at the impact on public schools from a funding standpoint, public schools already need as much funding as possible, but also need support. So what is happening there? What's happening is that politics itself, a lot of people are being turned off. They call it the polarizing, or the polarization of politics, but really it's to stop people from participating. I want everyone to understand that this is our democracy. It's your democracy. It's my democracy. This is our country, your country, my country. This is our Commonwealth, your Commonwealth, my Commonwealth, our city, your city, my city, our community, your community, my community. What happens to our country, our Commonwealth, our city, our community happens with our voice. The only way to make your voice heard, well, not the only way, but the most powerful way to make your voice heard is through voting. The reason why policies are enacted now is because some people chose either not to vote. There are some numbers out there, some say 4 million voters and so forth, that chose to stay home. A lot of people are looking at, what happened, of course, with a certain percentage of African-American males voting for the current president and others and so forth, which, again, when you look at the numbers, over 80% of black males voted for the Democratic candidate. And then, of course, over 90+% of black females voted for the Democratic candidate as well. So those are winning numbers. So it is essentially 9 out of 10 African-American voters voted for the Democratic candidate. But it's not about African-American voters. It's not about a certain demographic. It's about the amount of voters that stayed home. Don't stay home. Go out and vote. Make sure that your voice is heard, because if it's not, then others will. They not might, but they will create policy for you that you may not like. Now, when you take a look at various policies that both candidates stand on, one side looks at the other side policy as being socialism. The other side says that the Trump-led cuts threaten rural health care and Medicaid, which that is definitely true. When you look at the numbers, hospitals are struggling to stay open. And with these draconian cuts, it's going to be hard for them to stay open. But one thing I want to make sure that we understand is that no matter what happens, it can't happen without you. Go vote. Go vote. Go vote. Make sure that your voice is heard. Make sure that you are participating. Make sure you're going up to candidates and their forums. Make sure that you're engaging as many people as possible in your community, in your household, to go out and vote. You know, in my household, we make sure every citizen, which is over 18 right now, go out and vote. You know, they were both at school, but when the boys come home, have you voted? Vote early. We reschedule it. When they were smaller, we would take them with us into the booth so they would know how to vote and know the importance of it. Many of our ancestors died for this right to vote. Don't let their sacrifice be in vain. Once again, November 4th is the general election where we will elect a new governor, lieutenant governor, also a new attorney general, and all 100 seats of delegates. The last day to register to vote is October 24th, and early voting starts September 19th. September 19th, early voting starts. You can vote early in person all the way through November 1st. Make sure your voice is heard. Once again, we want to thank you for joining us for this edition of Stay the Water, where we bring movers, shakers, and policymakers to you to discuss issues important to the community. We will have individuals who are running for office on the show, moving into our election preview, leading up to our Get Out the Vote show, which is the Sunday before Election Day. So we're excited. I want you to be excited. But first, I want you to enjoy this Labor Day. Enjoy your labor. Make sure that you take some time for yourself and your family, because at the end of the day, you got to take care of yourself, because a better you is a better us. Until next time, be good, be great, God bless, and we'll see you next week.
Hi, I'm Carrie Washington, and you're listening to State of the Water with award-winning host Dr. Eric Claville.